Hello everyone, this is Travail, and I'm here today to bring you a video called the Spikers of ADV, as you can obviously read on your screen. Spikes is one of the most important moves in ADV. In fact, I would go as far to say that it is the best single move in the game. It is single-handedly carrying the viability of a lot of Pokemon, and we're going to talk about which of them are the most viable. And we'll do it kind of in a tier list format. But before we get started, let's take a look at the viability rankings. This is possibly soon to be outdated. I'm excited to see what the 2025 viability rankings look like. But as you can see, Skarmory is sitting there at number 2, probably going to stay that way. There are a lot of people who think that Skarmory is the best Pokemon in ADV, but I think that contingent is a little bit smaller than a majority, so Tyranitar, you will stay the king. Forretress is there at about, I think about 20. Pretty reasonable, and considering how many pretty good Pokemon it is ahead of, and how close it is to some other, like, really good Pokemon, I think that's pretty respectable. Cloyster and Smeargle are down there in that D tier, which is definitely not bad. Glalie even gets a mention in E tier, which would put it at about, I think, 45th, 46th. Somebody check my counting on that. It's all pretty good, but these are not all of the Spikers in the tier. We are going to talk about all of them, at least a little bit, so stay tuned for that. But for the comment question of the video, which Spiker is your favorite? For me, I think I'm going to have to keep it simple and say Skarmory. I know that's a pretty vanilla take, but if it's not Skarmory, well then it's probably Forretress, which is also a pretty vanilla take. But yeah, I've not explored too much with the more exotic Spikers, but I'd be interested in doing it, and if you're interested in seeing me cover a specific Spiker other than Smeargle, no, I'm kidding, you can ask for Smeargle as well. Ask me in the comments and I may consider it. So why are Spikes so good? Well, they're great for maintaining a lead in a Pokemon contest. So Spikes, this move right here, 2 hearts in the clever format, sometimes called smart. It makes the Pokemon that go after you nervous. So if you start a round, you can click Spikes and potentially steal the turn of the Pokemon that are coming after you. So here's an example. This Shedja, the Kirlia, is nervous and it's not able to perform its move. That means that it's not getting any sort of appeal, and it's not making any progress towards winning the Pokemon contest, so that's pretty big. Another thing about Spikes is that they combo great with phasing moves. So with your Roar and your Whirlwind, you're going to get an extra appeal, which gives you, I think it's 3 more hearts. I'm not entirely sure, somebody check me on that, but yeah, that's really good because most moves on average, like at best, give you 3. So that's not gonna hate on that, and especially if you can pop your Roar or your Whirlwind. Whirlwind would be even better because it has that synergy with being in the same format, the same clever category. You can pull that off on the last turn, then you can get a really nice injection of points, and you don't even have to deal with the consequences of having to move later on the next turn, because, well, it's the last turn. Okay, but you're not here to hear about Pokemon contests, I don't think. I mean, some of you probably are, in which case you stumbled on the right video for it somehow. You're here actually to know why they're so good in Gen 3 OU. I mean, free damage, who's going to complain about that? Well, you will complain about that if you are the person on the receiving end of it. For 1 layer, you will be taking 1/8 of your max health, or 12.5%. For 2 layers, you'll be taking 1/6, or 16.7%. And 3 layers, you'll be taking a quarter, so 25 whole percent. That's huge. Though the caveat is that Pokemon that have a ground immunity, i.e. they're a flying type or they have the ability to levitate, will not take spikes damage. So that's kind of the give and take there. But I think that that's fine because there are tons of great Pokemon that get very commonly used who do not have a ground immunity. So being able to do damage to those Pokemon is worth it, even if you're not able to damage certain other Pokemon on the top of their team. Blah, blah. Need to do vocal exercises before these. So for defensive teams, spikes will limit the defensive pivots so that they can't come in on certain attacks, or they can only come in on but so many attacks. A pretty good example is Blissey. It can't switch into moves that nearly oak or nearly 2-hit KO it. Take, for example, a Mixed Mence Brick Break does about, I think, 45%. Well, if that Blissey is taking a layer of spikes damage and switches in and takes the Brick Break, and Sand is up to stop it from getting its leftovers, well, now Brick Break is threatening to finish off the Blissey. So that's a move that wouldn't even really kill Blissey with a crit, is now threatening to get that KO because of the spikes damage and also a little bit of the gaming. You have to call the Blissey switch, but that's pretty big. Blissey might be the only thing that can switch into, say, like a Dragon Claw or a Fire Blast. So spikes is making it very difficult for Blissey to do its job. There are some other examples, say like a Pokemon like Swampert, who does not have an immediate recovery move. Taking spikes damage over the course of the game, putting it into range for one of your Pokemon to finish it off, and the best it can do is protect to get a little bit more chip healing. That can be big. Some Pokemon that otherwise would not be able to 1v1 Swampert can do so over the course of a game. And then another thing that is really important against some defensive teams is the PP stall win con. So there will be some situations where a defensive team is able to just switch back and forth between 2 Pokemon with healing moves, and occasionally go for the healing move until your Pokemon runs out of moves. This is definitely a possibility for, say, like a Lastmon Suicune angle. Maybe your team is relying on Suicune to be a win condition, and then their team has something like the combination of Blissey and Vaporeon, where the 2 of them together, just switching back and forth, can stop your Suicune from being able to make progress in a lot of cases. But if you're able to put spikes down on the field, then those Pokemon are going to be taking upwards of a quarter of their HP every time they switch in, meaning that they have to burn through their recovery moves, meaning that you might actually be able to weather that storm and win the game. Now, maybe that example is not perfect because Suicune still can't really hit Vaporeon for all that much damage, but you sort of get the picture where if they have a strategy where all they can do to win is switch back and forth until you run out of moves, and you have spikes down on the field, then like you better have used up some moves before that point, otherwise they're going to lose the game before you do. Versus some offense teams, it can put frail Pokemon into easy KO range. So there are a lot of Pokemon like, say, Medicham, for example, who sit just outside of one-shot range from a lot of attacks. Like, for example, a Starmie Hydro Pump, or a, say, Tyranitar Earthquake. I think +1 Earthquake even. So Medicham can kind of maneuver around, trade some damage from one hit to deal big damage back, and be a big nuisance for some teams. But if you're able to get a spike on the field, that kind of limits Medicham's ability to do that. Even with just one spike worth of damage, now Medicham's going to die to a Starmie Hydro Pump. Now it's going to die to a +1 Earthquake. So it won't be able to revenge kill either of these Pokemon. That's pretty big. I will say, though, some of these offense teams, when you have a lot of glass cannons, you kind of don't really mind them being easy to die, or quick to die, I should say. The game plan is often to beat the crap out of you before you beat the crap out of me. But, like, Spikes can at least help you to beat them faster than they beat you. Another thing that it does is it forces earlier sacks. So sometimes what offensive teams want to do to generate momentum is to keep a lower health Pokemon so that they can switch in and sack it off at some point in the game. You can force some slightly earlier sacks, particularly for defensive Pokemon that have, like, immunity, or, sorry, offensive Pokemon that have immunities that they could be pivoting into to try to set up some line. So, like, for example, if they have let's say an offensive Swampert trying to pivot in on an electric type move so that they force the Pokemon using the electric type move to have to click a different button, maybe like Gengar having to click Ice Punch now, or Zapdos having to click HP Grass, then they use that opportunity to pivot into something else, whatever the case may be, something that doesn't want to take an electric type move. Maybe it's like Charizard or something. You getting the spikes damage on that Swampert is going to limit their ability to make that play throughout the game. They may only be able to do it once or twice, whereas if there are no spikes down, they can kind of do it indefinitely, right? And then you're forced into a bunch of 50-50s, so it kind of simplifies the game a little bit for you when you're up against an offense team. But here's the tier list. First, we have the Michael Phelps tier for the GOAT Spiker. I mean, I'm not going to make any bones about it. Skarmory's the GOAT. And we're going to talk about why it's so good when we get to its particular section. But the other tiers that we have is worthy of OU, which is going to be Spikers that have proven and consistent success in OU, whether that be on ladder or in tournaments. You might see them on sample teams, etc. Fits on some teams is going to be Spikers with reasonable niches on good teams. Good teams, again, referring to things that have been used to hit high ladder or in tournaments. Underexplored is going to be for Spikers that have decent traits, but they kind of lack a track record. Maybe somebody has top ladder with them and I just don't know about it, or maybe somebody has used them to great success in tournaments that I don't know about as well, but I don't know about them, so they're, at least to me, a little bit underexplored, and I encourage you to maybe educate me if you think that I'm missing something from them. And then Be For Real is going to be for Spikers that really only succeed when you're farming clips. So all of you Tempt 6T fans out there, maybe these are the Spikers for you, but for the rest of us who would like to not lose half of our ladder games and would like maybe a chance to win a tournament set, maybe don't use these. And there's also some banned Spikers in the OU tier. Both Cacnea and Cacturn are not allowed to be used in OU because they only have the ability Sand Veil, which is banned. Trust me when I say that you do not want these Pokemon in the tier when they have Sand Veil. It just makes the game really annoying, and there's just not really much consistent counterplay to them. They're always going to have just an evasion boost as long as Tyranitar is on either team, which, I mean, if you're using Cacturn, you would want to use Tyranitar. Yeah, kind of brutal. But I'll make a mention of them here so that you can't say in the chat that I didn't say anything about them. They're here. I don't know if they're good in NU or RU or UU, whatever lower tiers that they may possibly get used in, but I don't know, they seem okay. So that's all I have to say about them. Diglett fodder, maybe. These Pokemon in the Be For Real tier have bad stats and are simply outclassed, usually by their evolutions. These are all Pokemon who I don't think they're technically like Little Cup designation. I don't know if that's a thing in ADV, really. I think there is a Little Cup tier. Don't know if any of these are banned from it. But I believe Pineco is in maybe NU, and the other two are in PU. I might be wrong about that. Don't crucify me, because I really do not know much about the low tiers in Gen 3. Maybe I should explore them more. I don't know. But here are their stats. Snorunt, who... It's really messed up that they made a Pokemon Snorunt in Gen 3 and then Snover in Gen 4. Like, I get those two not confused, but like I mix up which one I'm saying sometimes. So if I say Snover, you know I mean Snorunt. But Snorunt has 50s across the board, just like its dad, Glalie, who has 80s across the board. It's kind of balanced, but not fantastic. And when we get into the higher tiers like OU, well, I mean, that's just not really cutting it. You're gonna die and get outsped by a lot of things. Like you might be able to get a spike off versus something, but like, I don't know. If you're gonna do all that, just use Glalie instead, right? It's got the same stats, the same move pool, or it's got better stats across the board, the same move pool, the same type. Like, there's just no advantage that Snorunt provides over Glalie. I don't know, unless you're looking for like a crazy hyper specific get down to a Pinchberry range, but I mean Glalie can kind of do that as well, which we'll talk about when we get to Glalie. Ammonite has, I think, considerably better stats than Snorunt. I almost said Snover. With a much higher defense. Slightly higher special defense, but with the HP being a little bit lower, it's not really that important. It does have a not terrible base 90 special attack, though I would not suggest that you invest too much in that if you are going to use this in OU, because, like, what are you hitting? I mean, maybe Ice Beam on Salamence is a consideration, but I don't know. Its speed is pretty abhorrent. It's going to be outsped by almost everything in the OU tier, save for maybe Snorlax and maybe Dusclops. But, yeah, at least it has a slightly decent defensive type. Rocket being a normal resist kind of matters. Water is usually a decent type, although I don't think Rock complements it all that well. But all of this being said, Ammonite is just worse than Amistar, so yeah, I wouldn't use Ammonite. Pineco, I guess, technically has an advantage over Forretress if you like really wrap your mind and do these mental gymnastics, in that it is a pure bug type, which means that it is not 4 times weak to fire, which means that it is a fighting resist. And those things might be useful, although Pineco's stats are so abysmal that I don't think that I would suggest that. I will say, at the very least, for Pineco, it has Rapid Spin. So, if you are forcing yourself to have to use a Pokemon as bad as Pineco, at least stat-wise, you have the utility of Spikes plus Rapid Spin, so that's not, like, the absolute worst, but I would say just in general you want to use Forretress before you want to use Pineco. The underexplored Pokemon, these are some Pokemon that have legitimate utility, but their flaws make it difficult to justify using them in lieu of traditionally better Spikers. So this would be our UU Spikers, Qwilfish and Amistar respectively. Here are their base stats. I think that they're not all that bad, really. Well, Qwilfish is not fantastic, I'm not gonna lie, but 85 base speed is actually not that bad. I believe that makes it the fastest of the Spikers that we're talking about in this video. So that's kind of interesting. And 95 base attack, while like your Sludge Bomb is not really that strong, it's a little bit threatening, I guess, to certain things that are I can't really say weak to it, because the only Pokemon that really is weak to it is like Celebi, I guess Breloom as well. But the things that take neutral damage from poison probably don't want to take a Sludge Bomb from Qwilfish, but really Explosion is the big deal. A 95 base power or 95 base attack Explosion is actually pretty considerable. Like, think about Pokemon like Claydol, who have base 70, and how strong their Explosion is. Qwilfish is going to be quite a bit stronger than that, so that's really nice. Staying with Qwilfish, I think what makes Qwilfish interesting is its combination of ability and certain moves that it gets. So Intimidate is actually pretty good. It gives a -1 attack to the opponent whenever Qwilfish hits the field. That gives you some entry points versus certain Pokemon, particularly fighting type Pokemon, which you resist the stab of. So Qwilfish can come in, say on a Heracross, give that a -1, and then you're going to be able to get 1 or 2 layers up, depending on whether that Heracross is wanting to stay in. Because you're resisting both bug and fighting. Most of the other fighters are just going to be using fighting as their stab. Medicham does not really run Psychic. I guess you could, but it just doesn't really exist. Save that for draft. I guess Blaziken also runs its stab, but its other stab happens to be fire, which Qwilfish resists anyway, though it does hit on the considerably lower special defense stat, so you'll probably live a Fire Blast, but I don't know if you're going to be taking multiple. We have some interesting moves here. Destiny Bond is pretty good on a like suicide spike lead idea. If you're faster than your opponent, you can get the Destiny Bond off, and if they kill you on that turn, then they're going to die themselves. You could also set it up the other way, where if you know you're going to live a hit against a faster foe, you can set up the Destiny Bond, and then your opponent is not going to be able to attack into you on the next turn for fear of losing their Pokemon, which gives you a turn to do something, which might be Thunder Wave, it might be another Spike, you could even Explode. I didn't mention Explosion here, but that is a pretty big move that Qwilfish gets, though I will say that Qwilfish is not unique in its ability to use Spikes and Explosion, which is probably why you don't really see it very much, but I do think it's interesting that it does get Haze and Thunder Wave, though. Haze is not really great with the Intimidate synergy, but Haze could be useful maybe in cases where you're up against, say, a Calm Mind spammer like Suicune, and you need to make sure that Suicune does not have any stacks. I don't know if Qwilfish is necessarily the best at doing this job, but if you need the roll compression of stopping Suicune from setting up to plus 10 million and being able to get spikes down on the field, then that could be something. It's actually not even that bad if you say Haze to reset Suicune's stats and then Explode. You're faster than most Suicune are going to be, so actually it's a speed tie on base, but you tend to be able to afford more speed investment on Qwilfish, I would think. So you could, reset their stacks and then Explode on them to make sure that they can't get any more stacks, and then you can get into your actual Suicune counter, like say Zapdos or Jolteon or whatever it may be. And then Thunder Wave is kind of cool. Did you know that Qwilfish is the only Pokemon legal in ADV OU who's able to use the combination of Spikes and Thunder Wave? Well, except for Smeargle, but it's kind of cool that Qwilfish can do it. There is another Pokemon that gets that combination in Gen 3, but that Pokemon is Deoxys, who is not even close to being allowed in ADV OU, so we don't have to worry about that. But let's talk a little bit more about Lurid Helix, the Amistar. So, some cool things about Amistar that I noticed. Those two stats right there, defense and special attack, that is the highest defense and special attack for any water type in Gen 3, excluding Kyogre. So, that's kind of cool that you have a really strong Hydro Pump, the strongest in the game unboosted, I should say, and a pretty good defense stat to allow you to live hits from physical attackers. Both of these Pokemon on screen right now are weak to ground, which means that they are susceptible to getting Dug Trapped, but Amistar is pretty likely to live an Earthquake even with no investment, so that's honestly not bad. And with a really, really strong Surf or Hydro Pump or even Ice Beam coming off to revenge the Dugtrio, you could do worse. Now, I think that it is a little bit tough to do the sort of Swift Swim sweeper idea with Amistar in conjunction with making it a robust spiker, but I mean, it has the option to do it, and not very many other Pokemon do. In fact, no other Pokemon do. So that's kind of cool. It is a little bit of a misconception I've seen very commonly that people think that Amistar gets Explosion. It does not, unfortunately. If it did, it might have a little bit more of an argument to be used, but alas, it does not. So yeah, we're going to have to roll with that. The ×4 weakness to grass is not fantastic, so keep that in mind when you're up against mixed or special attackers who might be packing it. You're not going to be able to get spikes off in front of those Pokemon, but all in all, I don't think Amistar is too terrible, and I think it could probably be used to some amount of success if you build the right team for it. But that's going to be it for like the lower half of the tier. Let's just get a little bit of an overview for those of you who have TikTok attention spans and don't remember what happened a few slides ago. Up in the Wayne Gretzky tier, we still have Skarmory, which we're definitely going to be talking about, and then some UUs in our underexplored and some basically baby Pokemon in the Be For Real category. But now we're going to get into what I think is going to be the more interesting tier here is fits on some teams. So these are the Pokemon that I think have some amount of niche where they could be considered on like a real tournament team. Well, I guess Amistar and Quillfish could be considered, but these are the ones who have been considered and actually have done not terrible. And by not terrible, I mean they've won like a game against a reasonable player. So right on our left, I don't know why I set it up like that. That was very confusing. We're doing some misdirection. It's like a magic show here. I can just go back to the previous slide and like that. There's Smeargle. Smeargle's claim to fame is that it learns every single move that is possible to learn in ADV. And that includes the move Spore, which is probably the strongest utility move. I mean, if any Pokemon could get any move, Spore would be the best move, period. The only reason why I don't tend to consider Spore to be the best move is because the only like good Pokemon that gets it is Breloom. Smeargle, I guess, also gets it and is pretty good, so we can consider him in that discussion. But Parasect, sorry, buddy, but you're not that good. Smeargle is capable of setting up multiple layers because it can get free turns with Spore, or at the very least, it can force your opponent to make awkward switches early in the game, which kind of disrupts their early game plan. So that's pretty nice. Not very many other Pokemon can do that to the same extent that Smeargle can. Glalie in the middle, who I believe is, I don't know if it's an NUBL or an RU Pokemon at this stage. I know that it is recently moved up from the NU designation, has the combination of Explosion and Ice Beam, which is pretty indicative of Cloyster, but it is a little bit faster than Cloyster, which gives it some more, valuable niche. It's also got a lot more special defense than Cloyster does, so it matches up a little bit better into some particular leads, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then we have Roselia here, who is I believe, an NU Pokemon, who you would think is not all that good. I mean, it gets a evolution in the next generation, so even Game Freak didn't think it was that good a Pokemon on its own. But it does have some interesting technology. The combination of Natural Cure and Aromatherapy is really, really good for status control. So it can kind of compress the role of a hazard setter and a cleric for your team. So we'll go a little bit more in depth on each of these Pokemon. First, let's talk about Smeargle. So Smeargle does have a sample team here. This is called Smeargle Spikes. The sort of gist of this is you're going to start with Smeargle. If your opponent does not threaten to one-shot kill you, which you'd be surprised how many Pokemon Smeargle can live a hit from. Like, for example, a modest Zapdos with this particular EV spread. You can also live hits from Tyranitar, Salamence. Pretty much the only Pokemon that is threatening to one-shot you is Choice Banded Metagross. But you outspeed almost all Pokemon in the lead. Well, I shouldn't say that. You're not outspeeding Zapdos or Salamence. But you'll outspeed some of the other common leads, like Tyranitar, like Suicune, like Metagross. And you'll be able to get a Spore off on them. That's going to give you a free turn to get a Spike, potentially multiple free turns to get Spikes, and possibly decommissions their lead for a good chunk of the game if they opt to switch out. We also have Explosion here. Let's see if I have some text to go along with this, but Explosion is a option to kind of spin block against slower rapid spinners. Smeargle does technically speed tie Claydol, but Claydol is not going to be running max speed with a plus speed nature, so you will be able to get a faster boom on that. You'll be able to get a faster boom on Forretress, on Armaldo if that's their spinner. The only one really that is the exception to this is Starmie, but Explosion probably just straight up kills most Starmie, so that's not bad. You get stab on it, by the way, with Smeargle, so even though you have a pretty abysmal, I think, base 20 attack, Explosion being so broken, in conjunction with you getting stab, means that you don't even really mind having no investment. But it is really good at generating momentum for your team. It can stop a setup sweeper from coming in and trying to abuse Smeargle's sort of lack of pressure as well, so that's pretty nice. Last move on there is Will-O-Wisp. I don't know if this has been updated since the Speed Pass ban. One of the big flaws for Smeargle, which is why I rate it this low, is that you are not able to pass speed anymore. Smeargle can still pass other stats, and it has access to some really, really good stat boosting moves like Belly Drum, like Tail Glow, which is not very common. The only other Pokemon that could do that is Volbeat. That still make it a decent baton passer, but with this particular lead Smeargle set with the Salac Bear, you're not able to pair it with Baton Pass. If you could, then this would actually, I think, be a much stronger team, a much stronger Pokemon, and I would maybe even argue that it should be OU ranked. But alas, it does not have these, so I think it's going to be just on the borderline. But that being said, this Smeargle enables a team like this with a offensive Tyranitar and Metagross and Swampert and Aerodactyl especially to get a very strong start into a game and play very aggressively. So lead Smeargle is pretty indicative of offense teams. And if it's not going to be doing some cheesy-ish baton pass strategy, it's going to be getting these spikes up. And I think that it is one of the better Pokemon at doing that. But to keep with the theme of these offensive spike leads, let's talk about Glalie. And this is Jimothy Cool's Glalie Team. Or I don't know if Jim built it himself, but it is at the very least featured on Jim's channel and where I think most of you would recognize this team from. So this is kind of like a Jolt Spikes team. If you're familiar with the sample teams, Kurt's Jolt Spikes is one of the better teams in the format. Typically you'll see Skarmory as the spiker on that, and if not Skarmory, then Cloyster. But Glalie has some advantages over both of those Pokemon, in particular its lead matchups. So Glalie is better than pretty much any other spiker into Mence and Zapdos. The reason being is that its mono ice type means that it's not taking super effective damage from a electric move from Zapdos, and its higher Spadef is going to allow it to live a Fire Blast from Salamence. As well as being a mono ice type, you will have Stab Ice Beam. So even if Mence is trying to go for that 2-hit KO, you are threatening to just straight up kill them if they try to go for it. In most cases, I think sometimes Mence has enough special defense or HP investment to live, but not, I mean, it's got to be like kind of unreasonable, especially as a lead. So that's kind of nice. As you'll see, Glalie also is packing a Salac Berry on this team. That is to sort of help it with its pseudo spin blocking idea with a fast explosion. You'll be faster than every spinner in the tier, including Starmie, if you get down to your Salac Berry. And I think that the HP and Spadef investment on this Glalie is designed to help it get into Salac range versus certain things, like a Fire Blast from a coverage Pokemon, like, say, for example, Salamence. The rest of this team is pretty aggro as well. You have a little bit more defensive utility with the Pokemon Forretress here, who is actually quite good at switching into certain hits. Same with Gengar. You kind of don't need to have Will-O-Wisp on both, so I think Jim is opting here for more coverage and Explosion, of course, on Gengar, because you kind of need Explosion or Taunt to help you deal with Blissey. Then you have Tyranitar as a possible win condition, Swampert to contain certain threats in the mid-game, and then Jolteon as a fast cleaner to end the game, potentially. So that's quite good. Another thing that Glalie gets is Taunt, which is going to be really good in the lead Skarmory matchup, where you can just taunt them and they are not able to get their spikes up. And you're obviously going to be faster than Skarmory, so that's quite good. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty decent Pokemon. But now, let's talk about Roselia, which I think is the most interesting of these, because it's the most surprising that it actually sees some amount of usage. Although I don't think it's as surprising anymore. I've seen so many people try to use Roselia in revival tournaments. Many of those people are no longer with us. They didn't die, or I don't know, maybe some of them did, and if they did, rest in peace. But they are probably not still in the pool stage anymore. But that doesn't mean that Roselia is to blame for that necessarily. I think Roselia's shining moment in tournament was in Kalos Invitational, which was the predecessor to Gymvitational, meaning that it is probably the best showcase of ADV talent at the time that it was played, other than, like, I don't know, maybe SPL. top player Ban Manaphy, who you should know is one of the like 10 or so players that you need to know their name if you're an ADV person. Played with Roselia in a set versus the other really good player, Fear. So this is Kalos Invitational 6, Game 2. Ban Manaphy has lost the first game of the set and decides they're going to bring a Roselia team. So let's get into that right now. Okay, here we are. We're going to click play, and I'm going to do some off-the-cuff commentary for you. So lead Zapdos versus lead Arcanine. Arcanine is not a very common Pokemon, but it does have a decent matchup spread versus some of the common leads. We do see a switch to Suicune to take that, and now here comes the Roselia in on the Zapdos. Roselia is going to be able to get a spike here if it so chooses. Metagross has been baton passed as substitute. I don't know why the replay is not showing it, but of course it does have the substitute. Swampert's going to get rid of it and take a Toxic for its troubles. I miss the days of Toxic Metagross. I mean, I wasn't really around for them, but I imagine that it was kind of cool to be able to threaten bulky waters when they weren't using Refresh all the time. Now we have Tyranitar finding Zapdos. Fear is opting to take some damage on the Tyranitar, but Tyranitar is going to Dragon Dance. It's actually slower than the Zapdos, suggesting to me that it is probably a bulky Dragon Dance Tyranitar. But oh my gosh, it is +2/+2, kills the Zapdos. But fortunately for Fear, they have the response, which is this Breloom, who's going to Mach Punch into a Gengar switch. Somebody in the chat was asking Ban Manaphy if they had accidentally loaded a draft team, which is very funny, but no, this is real. This is what Ban Manaphy wanted when they were down 0-1 against this, facing elimination. Manages to deal with the Breloom with the Gengar, and going to switch to Roselia hard on the Suicune. As you can see, Roselia with its grass type is pretty good at taking on certain special attackers, in particular the waters like Suicune and the electrics like Zapdos. Leech Seed is going to be pretty annoying for this Suicune. We do see a switch to Doug, catching the switch to Tyranitar, which is very, very good for Fear, but that is going to allow Gengar to come in. It's actually not a banded Dugtrio, switching up moves to hit Gengar with, I don't know what hidden power that would be. Usually you would expect a Bug, but Gengar resists Bug, so it can't be that. Maybe it's HP Rock. I don't know. That's kind of crazy. Arcanine coming in, threatening to finish off the Suicune, does so with presumably hidden power fighting. And last mon revealed for Fear is a Kingdra, who's going to get Toxic, which is probably going to just spell the end of this game here. Arcanine is going to get surfed and die. Roselia is coming in. Kingdra's going to have to Ice Beam, but Roselia probably has the special defense to live that. It certainly does, and gets a Leech Seed off, meaning that it's going to live the next Ice Beam, barring a critical hit. It does so, although that was a crazy roll. Aromatherapy coming down. I don't know if that actually mattered. I don't think anything on the team had any status. But, oh, Kingdra's revealing Rest last move. Roselia is just kind of stalling turns with Spikes. And we're going to see a switch to Swampert. If this Kingdra is running Rain Dance and Rest, it's most likely not going to be able to run Hidden Power Grass to take out the Swampert. So that might just be the game. Fear going for a freeze, does not get it, does get a critical hit, but not enough, and Ban Manaphy wins that game. As you can see, that Roselia was really good at limiting the sort of power of this team. Zapdos cannot really click Thunderbolt into it very well. Suicune is going to get Leech Seeded, and Surf is not going to break through it. Even Breloom with mono fighting coverage is not doing that well into Roselia. And if you get a Spore off on Roselia, well, that's, I guess, okay, but Roselia with its natural cure can switch out and negate that a little bit. So you can get to a different sleep sack or get to a fighting resist if you so choose. So yeah, this was actually a really good matchup for Roselia, so very well scouted by Ban Manaphy. Okay, but what's better than one usage of Roselia in tournament? Well, a second usage of Roselia. This is same set, game 3, Ban Manaphy versus Fear, and we're going to take a look at that one as well. Okay, so here we are. Recall, Ban Manaphy dropped the first game of this set, won the second game of this set using Roselia, and spoiler alert, Ban Manaphy's going to bring Roselia again. So lead Zapdos, as we saw in the previous matchup, Roselia has a pretty good matchup into Zapdos. Zapdos is going to click Hidden Power. I assume that that's actually Hidden Power fighting and not Grass, because Thunderbolt should be doing more damage than Grass is to Tyranitar. Swampert is going to Focus Punch, trying to catch a special resist, or I should say a special wall. Catches Suicune, which is pretty good. Fear goes for Ice Beam, anticipating a switch, and finds the Zapdos, which is really nice. Though Jirachi is the switch in for Thunderbolt. We'll have to see what Jirachi set this is. Goes for Body Slam, so it's probably a defensive Jirachi. Gengar is pretty good into defensive Jirachi, all things considered, especially if it can get the Will-O-Wisp down. We'll have to see what the Will-O-Wisp switch-in is. Oh, there was no Will-O-Wisp switch-in. Fear's actually just going to take the burn here, trying to get his own burn. Does, which is pretty nice. I mean, both of these players probably need these Pokemon to perform some defensive roles for them, so that's not great. But we do have a Tyranitar, which is a pretty good switch into a defensive Jirachi. Manages to land a Toxic on the switch to Suicune. And then we're going to see a switch to Swampert, who will take the Surf. I imagine this is a defensive Suicune. So probably able to rest off that Toxic. Both players just opting to trade down a little bit here. I think this is favoring Manaphy just a little bit. And finally reveals the Roselia again. I really want to know what Fear was thinking about when this Roselia came for a second time in a row. We're actually going to reveal a Jinx in the back, which is pretty rare. You usually see Jinx in the lead slot, but finds a substitute, is able to get a lovely kiss off on Metagross, which is not great for Ban Manaphy, but Manaphy's just going to stay in. Goes for Earthquake, trying to break the sub from the Jinx, if the Jinx happened to stay in. And now is going to trade damage with this Claydol. Claydol goes for Psychic, I assume trying to catch the Gengar coming in, but Ban Manaphy is going to just stay in and get an Agility off. Now this is looking really, really dangerous for Fear. With a +1 Metagross with a +2 speed boost, having to sack the entire Snorlax to not just lose the game on the spot. Zapdos is going to come in, meet the Gengar. Is Gengar going to get sacked? No, we're going to see a switch to Swampert, which is pretty reasonable because, like I said, I think this is a mixed Zapdos with HP Fighting. If it was HP Grass, you would think that Fear would be clicking it right now. But instead opts to switch to Suicune. Both of these pressure mons using up all these Hydro Pumps. Hopefully Swampert doesn't need that too much for the foreseeable future here. Goes for Focus Punch, which does about the same amount of damage as Earthquake. I think it works out so they're about the same. Thanks to Stab Boost and Focus Punch's monstrous 150 base attack. Roselia is going to come in, threatens the Leech Seed, manages to land it on the Suicune, and this is going to be pretty nasty. Gets a Stun Spore off on the switch to Zapdos, and now this is looking really bad for Fear. Drill Peck coming down, not doing that much to this defensive Swampert. Or maybe it's just a high HP investment Swampert, maybe not exactly a defensive one. But that Focus Punch doing a decent amount of chip to the Suicune. Zapdos is going to enter. Who wants to take an electric move on this team? It's going to have to be the Jirachi, but with Burn, Jirachi is now going to be dead to the next Thunderbolt. And we're going to force this Jinx to come back in. So if we can weather the Jinx here, Zapdos should just win the game. Gengar is going to be sacked. Now we get into Tyranitar, who does have leftovers. Dodges a Lovely Kiss. Earthquake kills the Jinx, and that's it. The game's over. And even, you don't even need to necessarily go straight to Zapdos to cause some problems for the Suicune here. You can go to Roselia, who can resist some hits. Does not resist an Ice Beam, although Tyranitar takes the Ice Beam well enough to survive, which is pretty crazy. Now going to switch into Roselia on the turn that Suicune goes for Rest, and you can simply just get a Leech Seed off here and switch to your own Zapdos. If Fear opts to switch to their Zapdos, well, they're paralyzed, so it's not going to be a great look for them. Mana actually chooses to switch to Tyranitar, supposedly, presumably to call the switch to Zapdos, and manages to crit a Rock Slide on the sleeping Suicune. Gonna force it to have to click Rest again, as Manaphy goes for Earthquake just to get some damage. Now Zapdos is in. Should be 2-hit KOing the Suicune. And also 2-hit KOing the Zapdos. So this is wrapped up in a bow. And there you go. This is how Band Manaphy came back down a game with bringing Roselia twice. That's incredible. So there you go. And many have tried to replicate this, and very few have succeeded. But we'll talk a little bit more about what Roselia can do. So this is the set that Vapicuno suggests for Roselia. I'm not exactly sure if this is what Band Manaphy used in his sets, but you're having max HP investment, a little bit of defense, a little bit of special defense, and a little bit of speed. With the moves Spikes, Stun Spore, Aromatherapy, and Leech Seed. So you don't have any sort of attacking moves, but I think that these are some of the best utility moves you could have on a Pokemon in general. And Roselia, having access to all of them is quite good. Some other sets that I recommend that you check out are Kalos Invitational 6, so the same tournament as this Band Manaphy set. Super Epic Ampharos brings it versus Jabba the Griffin. And in ROA PL, I think that's Ruins of Alph Premier League, H-Clap brought it versus Tala. So I encourage you to seek those out. I may put them in the description if you're interested in watching those as well. But some Roselia gaming, and there you go. Roselia, not a bad Pokemon. Now we're getting into some of the more commonly used Spikers in the tier. These are the worthy of OU Pokemon. Unsurprisingly, it's going to be the 2 OU ranked Spikers who are not named Skarmory. But as Skarmory is the top competition for a Spiker, the discourse surrounding these two often lies in their comparison to Skarmory. And those two Pokemon are Forretress and Cloyster. So we'll start with Forretress. It's actually favored to survive the Mag Trap. HP Fire to a max special defense investment Forretress only has about a 25% chance to KO. So Forretress can usually survive and then KO back with Earthquake with like no real investment. You don't have to run a tricky set like Yellow Skarm in order to do so. So that's actually pretty big. That means that you can get Forretress back into the game. Maybe if you have like Wish support, for example, and you're able to set up a scenario where you sack one Pokemon so that Forretress is able to get the Wish safely, that could be huge. Or even if you're just going to exploit a passive Pokemon who's not able to finish off a weakened Forretress, it's quite good. The move Zap Cannon, which Forretress infamously has access to, is able to spread paralysis. It also helps it to deal with two of its most common switch-ins, which would be like Skarmory and Gengar. I mean, Skarmory I don't think is a super common switch into Forretress, but one of the ideas for why you might want to bring Skarmory in versus a Forretress is, well, Forretress is going to spin the spikes away, and you want to get the spikes back up, so you go to your spiker, i.e. Skarmory. If you have Drill Peck, you can kind of beat down the Forretress, and if the Forretress does not have Zap Cannon, then there's not a ton that Forretress can do in response. It might have Counter as well, which could be brutal for Skarmory. I do think that Forretress is favored most of the time in the Skarmory 1v1, but there are situations where Skarmory may just be forced to have to beat down on the Forretress, depending on what team they are running. Particularly like your more defensive Skarmory teams. You have super effective Stab to punish the most common spinners in the tier, which are Starmie and Claydol. The Hidden Power Bug is threatening to two-shot both of them. Maybe not Claydol. Claydol might be running enough defense investment to avoid that, but Starmie in particular is taking a pretty hefty chunk from a Hidden Power Bug. So it's actually pretty good. You're threatening you with spinners. You have an option, albeit a pretty inconsistent option in Zap Cannon, to threaten the most competitive Spiker as well as the most competitive Spin Blocker. So Forretress actually is a quite solid Pokemon. Cloyster, I think, gets a lot more flack as a Pokemon. There are some people who would even argue that Cloyster should be dropped from OU to UUBL. I don't necessarily agree, although I do think that Cloyster is one of the weaker OU Pokemon for sure. But it does have some nice options. In particular, its dual stab combination is really strong. I mean, think about all of these offensive waters that you might be running, like Suicune or an offensive Swampert or Kingdra, Gorbis, maybe if you're getting very exotic with it. All of these Pokemon are running water plus ice move. So Cloyster has both of those as stabs, so that's really nice. That gives you some really interesting lead matchups, in particular versus Tyranitar and Salamence. Both of them are threatening to do a lot of damage to you, but if they are physical attackers, Forretress has a phenomenal base 180 defense stat, which allows it to live even super effective physical hits quite well. So despite the fact that it has a pretty abysmal ice as a defensive type, it's able to weather certain physical attacks, like a coverage Brick Break or even a stab Rock Slide from Tyranitar. It has better offensive stats than any of the OU ranked Spikers. Forretress has a decent 90 in attack, but Cloyster's has a 95, and Cloyster also just has a better special attack. I mean, that's not saying much because Forretress and Skarmory don't have very good special attack stats, but it is worth noting, and when you have a strong dual stab combination like water and ice, it's good to know. As for that physical attack, you might say, why does that matter? Cloyster's not going to be a physical attacker in this generation, and I would agree with that, but you do have the access to Explosion, which is, I mean, I just gassed up Quillfish for having a 95 base attack explosion. I would be hypocritical to not do the same for Cloyster. The other thing that Cloyster has that the other two Spikers don't is not being a steel type, which means that it's not trapped by Magneton. Although that's not to say that it's good into Magneton. With that really low special defense stat, you are threatened quite severely by a Magneton Thunderbolt, so you're going to have to switch out. And Cloyster usually cannot afford to run as much speed as Magneton, even though they technically both have the same speed stat. So yeah, you're not really advantaged for staying in on Magneton. So, but both of these Pokemon have some teams that they are used on. I will show you just one of the sample teams for each of them. This is Behee's Forretress Mt team, which is, I think, a really good indicator of all the things that Forretress usually wants on a team. Forretress, as a spinner, needs pursuit support to handle the spin blockers, i.e. Gengar. So very commonly you will see it paired with Tyranitar. There are some other pursuit trappers like Houndoom and Umbreon. Umbreon, I think, also works decently well with Forretress because the move that Gengar usually wants to click on Forretress is Will-O-Wisp, and being able to come in on a Will-O-Wisp with a synchronized Pokemon like Umbreon will punish that Gengar super hard, and then you also pursuit trap it, so that's really nice. It also has Wish, which is, as we're going to see, a really good option for pairing with Forretress. But before we get too far into that, let's talk about Forretress versus Skarmory a little bit more. Why is Forretress so good into Skarmory, you might ask? Well, it has to do with how much PP the move Rapid Spin has. 64 PP versus Spike's 32. If you can get Forretress in versus Skarmory, you can just kind of click Rapid Spin forever, and Skarmory can't really do much about it. Now, this is especially bad for a Skarmory who is packing Toxic as its only, like, offensive quote-unquote move. You really can't do anything to Forretress, and roaring it is not really going to help because Forretress spins the hazards away, gets roared out, and then it's just going to switch back in to stop you from being able to make much progress. With leftovers, chip healing, it's going to be fine. Now, versus Drill Peck Skarm, you may have a little bit more of an issue, but Forretress has some techs that it can run to help you out with that. In particular, Counter can be really good at dissuading Skarmory from staying in and trying to beat down the Forretress with Drill Peck. We don't see that on this particular Forretress, but you have so many other Pokemon that switch in really well to a Drill Peck Skarm that I don't think it's that big an issue. For example, Swampert this Swampert set is not very scared of Drill Peck Skarmory. Neither is the Zapdos or the Tyranitar, so you have some really nice options there. Even Ments can switch into a Drill Peck from Skarmory. You could also use the move Zap Cannon, like I said, and in particular, I think Zap Cannon pairs really nicely with a higher physical defense Forretress. Now, losing out on the special defense means that you're very likely to die to Magneton trapping you, but you may have a team where you don't really mind Magneton trapping the Forretress, or you might be in a tournament situation where you don't anticipate that your opponent is going to bring Magneton, in which case you can afford a more physically defensive Forretress who maybe only takes like 14-ish% from a Drill Peck from Skarm. You can slam it with a Zap Cannon, and then every time Skarmory gets paralyzed, you're basically undoing an entire turn of Drill Peck with leftovers recovery. So that's actually really nice. Gives Forretress a lot more longevity versus the opposing Skarmory. Wish is a really good move to pair with Forretress because Forretress is going to be taking a lot of chip damage over the course of a game, whether it be from a Skarmory's Drill Peck, Maybe they have a Pokemon that is trying to trade into the Forretress a little bit, like a defensive Swampert clicking Surf or Milotic clicking Surf or whatever the case may be. And also Forretress taking Spikes damage because unlike Skarmory, it is not immune to ground type moves, ergo it is taking damage from Spikes. And you are going to want to switch Forretress in when Spikes are on the field so you can spin them away. So yeah, Forretress takes a lot of little bits of damage throughout the game, and being able to wish to get 50% HP back on the Forretress is big. Another thing that I don't mention over here on the right in this text is aromatherapy. Forretress is going to be a magnet for Will-O-Wisp because it invites in Gengar and Moltres. Although I should not be staying in really versus either of those Pokemon. But yeah, those two love to just slam Will-O-Wisp down. It is a Pokemon that is pretty likely to get Body Slam paralyzed from Snorlax because, well, being a defensive steel type, you tend to want to stay in on Snorlax in a lot of cases. And with Sand up, you can kind of beat down a utility Snorlax with Forretress. But getting paralyzed on Forretress can be kind of annoying. If you lose a turn on a Pokemon as exploitable as Forretress is, then you might end up losing your Forretress and not getting anything out of it. So being able to aromatherapy the status away is pretty good. It's also really good at helping the Pursuit Trapper that you pair with Forretress because very, very commonly, as I said, Gengar is going to be clicking Will-O-Wisp while Forretress is in. So that Tyranitar on this team is very, very commonly going to get Will-O-Wisp burned by Gengar. And you might want to keep the Tyranitar around for later in the game, so aromatherapy will help you do that. Now we're talking about Cloyster, and this is kind of not exactly a secret sample team, but this is one of the alternatives to the very, very popular El Clasico called El Cloysico. This is pretty much the same 6 as El Clasico. You just swapped the Skarmory out for Cloyster, which you would think would not be a great trade, but it does allow this team to play at a little bit of a faster pace. So where Cloyster kind of excels is that it finds entry points on physical attackers and starts setting the spikes. But unlike Skarmory, who kind of does that as well, Cloyster is threatening to just explode, which can generate a lot of momentum for these offensive teams. Now, you also have the possibility of Surf or Ice Beam, depending on what your opponent is bringing in. Maybe, for example, if you get Cloyster in versus Tyranitar, you can go for Surf and try to get the 2-hit KO on that Tyranitar. Or if you opted to have Ice Beam, which this team does not, you could be threatening to Flying type switch-ins like Zapdos or Aerodactyl, or more importantly, Salamence. So that's pretty big. Unlike Forretress, Cloyster can deal some pretty decent damage to Gengar on a switch-in because of its Stab Surf or Ice Beam. So you don't really need to have a Pursuit Trapper dedicated to removing Gengar. Now, that being said, Cloyster also has really, really low special defense and is very easy to one-shot or two-shot with special attacks, even in some cases resisted ones like Hydro Pump. So you will not be able to keep Cloyster around for a really long time, and you may not be able to get a spin off, but that's kind of okay because Cloyster's 4 moves, you click spikes, and then the other 3 moves, you are just clicking whichever one is best into the short-term situation that you find yourself in. If it's spinning a hazard away and you're dead, okay, well, that's great because you're up a spike at that point. Or if it's exploding to get some momentum or to finish off something that is trying to set up in front of Cloyster, then that's great as well. Or, you know, to kind of spin block a slower spinner, maybe if it was, say, Claydol. That could make a lot of generate a lot of steam for you going into the later part of the game. So I encourage you to try this team out if you're interested in using Cloyster. It is one of the best Cloyster teams. There are plenty of other good Cloyster teams. They're just a little harder to find. You may have to scour the Showdown, the Smogon forums to find them. So, but this is a pretty classic one here, pun fully intended. Now, finally, we're talking about the GOAT, which is Skarmory. Here he is, right here. What a majestic Pokemon. Steel Flying is a phenomenal defensive type. You're only weak to electric and fire, and you have no ×4 weaknesses, which is really, really nice. That affords Skarmory many entry opportunities, particularly against physical attackers, because you have a monstrous 140 defense. 65 HP and 70 SPDEF is not fantastic, but it's serviceable, so, and especially when you invest in it, so that's pretty good. Skarmory is very, very easy to get 3 layers with. I would say it's probably the easiest of all the Spikers because it's so good defensively. And there are not so many great counters to Skarmory. Well, I mean, there certainly are some Pokemon that hit Skarmory pretty hard, but a lot of those Pokemon Skarmory is going to switch out against. Magneton is the tried and true Skarmory counter, but there's still plenty of counterplay that Skarmory teams can have to not get destroyed by Magneton. And sometimes it's just as simple as clicking a spike as Magneton comes in, because some of these Magneton teams actually do not fare that well when even just one spike is down. So that's important to know. This set here, the standard Skarmory set, is going to be the vast majority of Skarmory, and you can get a lot done with just this. When I first started ADV, I thought it looked a little strange that the standard Skarmory set was Spikes, Roar, Protect, Toxic. I thought, isn't that like extremely exploitable, and super passive? Skarmory can't really do much versus a lot of Pokemon with that set, like for example Snorlax or a Steel type. But deceptively, this is really good at generating momentum. Getting a spike down and then roaring something that is doing like 20% to you, that is a huge win for Skarmory, because that's 12.5% that Pokemon is going to have to take again when it switches in. And Skarmory is just going to kind of heal up that chip damage with leftovers. Skarmory is one of the best Pokemon at abusing Protect turns to get chip healing. And this set is going to fit on almost every team in ADV. Well, I should say almost every Spikes team. There are some teams that kind of can't slot a Spiker. They want to be a little bit more aggressive. So Skarmory doesn't fit on literally every team, but almost every team will be improved by having a Skarmory on it, is what I will say. And as for the Skarmory sample teams, well, there are a lot of them. This is every Skarmory team that is on the Revival Tournament Discord sample team page. There are plenty of other sample teams on the Smogon forums that have Skarmory as well. So this isn't even all of them, and certainly there are a lot more that are just around, like that people build themselves. As you see, Skarmory is sometimes a lead, and it is really good in the lead slot, I think, because you can get the early spikes right away, and it kind of walls some of the more common leads, like Tyranitar and Metagross, at least a little bit. Tyranitar definitely has some options to handle, and Metagross can be a little scary if it's choice banded and clicking boom on turn 1. But that all being said, there are a lot of risks that the opponent has to take in order to deal with a turn 1 Skarmory. So yeah, and even against like a Mixed Ments, for example, or even Zapdos, clicking super effective moves into you, Skarmory can kind of just tank that and get it spiked down. And I mean, granted, it's going to be pretty low after that, but it's not even that terrible at taking those hits and then trying to make some progress later in the game. As you see, Skarmory's paired very commonly with Blissey. It's not on all of these teams, but Blissey being the special wall to Skarmory's physical wall is just a fantastic combo. And Skarm Bliss is one of the most potent cores in the format. Skarmory's reputation kind of just precedes itself. Most of you probably already know Skarmory, or you've played with a Skarmory team, or you've played against a Skarmory team, so almost certainly. And it's just viable on a lot of teams. So I think to more illustrate how good Skarmory is, let's take a look at the usage statistics from Gymvitational 2. Gymvitational 2, like I said, is one of the best showcasings of ADV every year. And Skarmory was the second most used Pokemon of all Pokemon in ADV, used on just under half of all teams. 182 games it was brought to, I think out of something like 368 or so. So yeah, that's a lot. For those of you who are wondering, the statistics for the other Spikers, Forretress was brought to just 28 games, under 8%. Cloyster to 10 games, which is under 3%. Smeargle, which we can't even be sure was running spikes on every set. Some of them may have just been part of Baton Pass chains, was under 2.5%. And Glalie, with 5 uses, so shoutouts to Glalie, having just over 1% usage. Roselia, Quillfish, and Amistar had 0 usage in Gymvitational 2, and then of course all the baby Pokemon were not used either. So that's a little bit unfortunate. Roselia, we just saw it had a little bit of tournament success there, but I suppose that this was not the year of Roselia for Gymvitational 2. Maybe Revival can turn that around, who's to say, but I certainly won't be contributing to that. So there we have it, kind of. This is the final tier list. We have the Jote at the top. Skarmory, what a fantastic Pokemon. Immune to Sand, Spikes, and Toxic. I mean, TSS, the most dominant style in the game, and Skarmory is blanking all of it. That's fantastic. But I don't know if we'll have much disagreement here. I think the only thing that people probably would disagree with is whether you're putting Smeargle in Worthy of OU, or whether you're putting Cloyster in fits on some teams. I think I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the history of these Pokemon, and I'm going to say that at least as a Spiker, Cloyster has a little bit more variety, where Smeargle has to fit on like mostly hyper offense teams. So that's where my discrepancy goes in. But if you have your own opinion and you want to let it be known in the comments below, I certainly invite you to do that. It helps me out when you guys comment. It also helps me out when you like and subscribe, so please do that as well. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. We'll be around for the next video, which probably is going to be on a particular Pokemon, and then we'll get back into the team building.